Good morning, everyone. This is Sandy Poole in the system office. I am filling in for Laura Tibbetts today. Chair Flores, I will turn this over to you to begin the call.
Thank you. Good morning and welcome to the Telephonic Rules and Regulation Committee meeting for November 10, 2021. I am Regent Don Flores, chair of this committee. The time is 11 o'clock a.m. Central Standard Time. Notice of this meeting was provided to the Secretary of State as required by Texas Open Meetings Act, Government Code, Chapter 551. Please note that the audio of this meeting is being broadcast live. Before we take a roll, I would like also to ask that and remind everyone to please mute their phones unless you need to speak. Sandy, let's begin roll call of committee members and any other regions.
Thank you, Chair Flores. I'll start with you.
Present.
Regent Foskey?
Present.
Thank you. Regent Tinsley?
Here.
Thank you. Chairman Amato?
Here.
Thank you. Regent Harrell? Regent Harrell?
I'm sorry. Present.
Thank you. Are there any other regions on the call? Thank you. Chair Flores?
Thank you. May we have a roll call of system office and component representatives?
Yes. Chancellor McCall?
Here.
Sean Cunningham?
Here.
Nellie Herrera?
Here.
Daniel Harper?
Here.
Kelly Winnemute?
Here.
Pierce Mitchell?
Here.
Derek Alexander?
Here.
Are there, Dr. Hayek?
Here.
Carol Fox?
Here.
Are there any other system staff on the call? Thank you.
Thank you. With that, I would like to note that Nellie Herrera briefed me on the agenda items.
Just a minute,
prior.
Chief Flores. I
Okay.
need to do the institutions. Lamar University.
Thank you.
Lamar University.
Jeremy Altop here with Dr. Taylor.
Thank you. Sam Houston State University.
Carlos Hernandez here for Dr. White, who is traveling.
Thank you. Sul Ross State University.
Good morning. This is Pete Gallego here, and I believe Dr. Matt Moore is also on the call with us, and Michael Pacheco.
Thank you. Texas State University.
Denise Trouth here, along with Eric Algo and Lisa Lloyd.
Thank you. Lamar Institute of Technology.
Rudy Gonzalez, Veronica Garcia, Angela Hill, Lonnie Howard.
Thank you, Dr. Howard. Lamar State College Orange.
Wendy Elmore, Mary Wicklund, and Tom Johnson.
Thank you. And Lamar State College Port Arthur.
Mary Wicklund sitting in for Dr. Renard.
Thank you very much. Chair Flores, that completes the roll call.
Okay, let me get this correct then. Okay, thank you. And with that, I'd like to note that Nellie Herrera briefed me on the agenda items prior to the meeting. At this time, I ask that she present the Rules and Regulations Committee agenda items. Nellie?
Thank you, Chairman Flores, and good morning to everybody on the call. The rule changes being proposed this time concern 4 topics. The first topic involves local committees of the Board of Regents. Changes are being proposed to 4 system rules that reference the local committees. The first rule is at page RR1, or if you're following along in the board book, it's board book page 379. This change explains that the Board of Regents, in its entirety, constitute the local committees of the board. It also requires that presidents continue to submit quarterly updates to the board on their components' operations, and it requires annual updates about the component to the board at a public meeting. The second rule change concerning local committees is at page RR2 or Board Book page 380. Now this change documents the year the Board of Regents established local committees to be comprised of the entire board. And it also eliminates redundancies in the language, as the Board of Regents and the local committees are now the same entity comprised of the same individuals. The third and fourth rule change concerning local committees are found at pages RR4 and RR6 or Board Book page 382 and 384. These changes eliminate reference to the local committee and eliminate reference to approval of certain actions by the local committee, since these rule changes already require approval of the Board of Regents. At this time, I'll ask Vice Chancellor Harper if he'd like to elaborate on these rule changes concerning local committees.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Nellie. And thanks to Regent Harrell. She asked both Nellie and myself to review the rules regarding the role of the local committee and look for ways to address some of the deficiencies that she identified prior to our August meeting. As some may know, the Education Code suggests that the board will have a local committee that will meet physically on campus once a year, that will confer with the administration on all the operations of the institution and report back to the board. Currently, as noted by Regent Harrell, the board only has 4 local committees, which are appointed by the chair, but they meet with the universities, not the state colleges. They meet telephonically. There appears to be no kind of uniform format of those 4 calls, and therefore the discussion topics vary. And then ultimately, the result of those conversations aren't shared with the full board. The intent of the law probably is a vestige of the past and likely predates every person on this phone call. It was a time when the institutions reported directly to the Board of Regents, and also at a time where physical distance and lack of modern technology limited the board's involvement. Nellie highlighted the proposed changes. I'll make one note. I did speak with Regent Scott on Monday, and he said he does like the format that Texas State provided him. And he asked that if this motion, or if these changes are ultimately adopted, that the system include in our prescriptive format on the president's quarterly reports, that there's a short synopsis of all of the items before the board for that respective meeting. And kind of the conclusion of this is, this proposed change will allow that all regents are provided equal access to and identical information about the operations of all 7 component institutions. And Nellie, that concludes my comments.
Chairman Flores, unless there are any questions regarding the proposed rule changes surrounding local committees, I'll proceed to the next item.
Are there any questions regarding this item? Nellie, please proceed to the next item, please.
The next proposed rule change is located at RR7 or Board Book page 385. And this involves the sinking fund reports. This change eliminates reference to the sinking fund report, as such term is apparently outdated. And again, I'm going to ask Vice Chancellor Harper if he'd like to elaborate on this change.
Yes, ma'am. So this item, as Nellie said, removes the outdated reference to the sinking fund report. We have no indication that system administration has prepared sinking fund reports, as we issue our debt under a revenue financing system. So we pledge all of the revenue of all of the components against the debt. And so they're not individual project funded, or they're not, the individual projects aren't funded by a specific revenue source. And then lastly, our annual financial report is the structure of it is dictated by the Comptroller of Public Accounts, and they do not include any reference to the inclusion of a sinking fund report in their format as well.
Chairman Flores, if there are no questions regarding this item, I'll move on to the next set of proposed changes.
Thank you. Are there any questions regarding this item? Nellie, please proceed with the next item, please.
Thank you. The next proposed rule change is to Chapter 6, paragraph 21 and 22. It's titled Foreign Travel for Educational Purposes. It's located at RR 8 or Board Book page 386. Now, the modifications to this rule would allow components the discretion to approve requests from students who wish to travel for educational purposes to countries designated at a level 3 by the U.S. Department of State. The component would have this discretion when the level 3 designation is due exclusively to the prevalence of COVID-19 and provided the student has signed a waiver of liability. Chair Flores, since the distribution of these proposed rules, there has been some interest expressed to expand the proposed change to include travel by students to countries that have been designated at a level 4.
Okay, Regent Tinsley or Foskey, do either of you wish to expand this proposed rule change to include travel by students to countries designated by the State Department at level 4 due to COVID-19?
Chairman Flores, I propose expanding the language to include student travel for educational purposes to level 4 countries when the level 4 designation is due exclusively to the prevalence of COVID-19. Therefore, I move we add the phrase or level 4 to paragraphs 14, 14.1, 14.2.
There is a motion by Regent Tinsley. Is there a second?
I second.
Regent, thank you. Are there any objections to the motion? There being no objections, the motion passes. Nellie, please proceed to the next item.
Yes, sir. The last set of proposed rule changes are to the Texas State University System sexual misconduct policy. And Chair Flores, with your permission, I'll lay out all the changes to the sexual misconduct policy and ask for questions at the end. The first in this grouping of rule changes begins at RR 9 or Board Book page 387 through 389. With this change, we are clarifying the version of the sexual misconduct policy that applies to reports of sexual misconduct. While our system has had a single system-wide sexual misconduct policy for a number of years, changes have had to be made to the policy to ensure compliance with both federal and state requirements. When a person makes a report of sexual misconduct, we want to be sure that the appropriate version of the policy is applied, and this is the reason for this first change. The second change to the SMP involves live hearings. This change clarifies that a live hearing will not be used in Title IX matters involving the College of Osteopathic Medicine. The federal regulations do not require that live hearings be used by academic medical centers, and the COM fits within the definition of an academic medical center for purposes of the Title IX regs, and this is the reason for this change. The third change to the SMP involves evidence that may be considered at a live hearing. This change clarifies that decision makers in a Title IX matter may consider statements made by parties or witnesses who do not participate in cross-examination at the live hearing. Until recently, this was not the case, and the decision makers were expressly precluded from considering statements that were not subjected to cross-examination at the live hearing. The Department of Education recently announced that it would no longer enforce that provision of the federal regulations and that prohibited colleges and universities from relying on testimony that was not subjected to cross. We are taking this opportunity in light of the Department of Education's recent announcement to make sure that our policy also reflects a change. This will allow for evidence presented at the live hearing that's not subject to cross-examination to be considered and weighed by the decision maker at a Title IX matter. The fourth and the last rule, changing to the sexual misconduct policy, involves appeals. This rule change eliminates conflicting language between two sections of the policy. It also clarifies that a person may appeal a finding and a sanction in a Title IX proceeding. In Regent Flores, unless there are questions regarding this last set of changes, this concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Nellie. Regent Foskey, Regent Tinsley, are there any items that either of you would like to move off consent for full consideration by the board?
I don't have any.
I don't have any, sir.
Thank you. As no one is requesting that we move any item off the consent agenda, Regent Foskey and Regent Tinsley, I move that we recommend board approval of the rule changes on the consent agenda. Regent Foskey, do you agree?
Yes, I agree.
Regent Tinsley, do you agree?
Agreed.
Thank you, Regent Foskey and Regent Tinsley, for your responses. In light of those responses, the rule changes will remain on the consent agenda with the committee's recommendation for approval. There are no further items to consider. So this concludes the business of the Rules and Regulations Committee and concludes today's telephonic meeting. Thanks for everyone calling and taking part. For the record, the time is 11:16 a.m. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you next week.
All right.